Welcome to Educator.com's AP English Language and Compositions course. This lesson is an introduction to the test and the course. Let's get started. Okay, we begin as we do in all of these lessons with an overview. We're going to ask about why this test exists. What are they actually testing? Why do they think it's important? Then we're going to look at what's on the test. What kind of questions are you going to be facing? And what stuff will you have to do? And finally, we'll look at how this course will work and help you to get a better score. All right, to begin with, why does the AP Language and Composition test even exist? The AP English Language and Composition exam is designed to test your ability to think, to reason, and to express your thoughts according to the rules of rhetoric. So, what's rhetoric? Well, rhetoric is the art of formal, emphasis on formal, written and oral expression. It's basically the art of thinking your thoughts and expressing them clearly. Now, many philosophers and a lot of teachers believe that if you can't express your thoughts clearly and logically, you're not really thinking clearly. This is a school of thought that goes back to ancient Greece, to Plato and Aristotle. Many of these Greek philosophers believed that if you couldn't think clearly, if you couldn't break things down into little categories and do your argument in steps and work through every angle of your thoughts, you were probably missing something really important. You weren't thinking clearly and you weren't as reliable when you spoke. They actually got the art of thinking and speaking down to an art form and named it rhetoric. And for hundreds, actually about 1,000 years, this was one of the major things that people were taught in school. You weren't considered qualified as a citizen, as a member of society, unless you could do these things. Even up until the late 19th century, every student who went through school had to study these ancient Greek philosophers, had to study rhetoric, very often had to study Latin as well to give them a foundation in grammar, and you weren't considered fully qualified to be an adult unless you could think and express yourself clearly. Well, one of the problems is, as this went on and on and on, the rules got more and more formal, they got more and more restrictive, and a lot of writers, particularly in the literary areas, started going, well, wait a minute. Sometimes a syllogism, which is a formal argument, isn't the form you want to express something. Sometimes you want to express your feelings and you want to be more free form. You want to experiment with language. You don't want to follow the rules. And they actually succeeded. They got to the point where they could write things without following the rules of rhetoric, without even following the rules of grammar in some cases. And you got a lot of really brilliant free-form expression. And a whole bunch of students started showing up at colleges with no idea of how to write a paper, no idea of how to make an argument, no idea of how to spot errors in their own logic, and it drove their professors absolutely bonkers. So, the pendulum swung back the other way, and now most colleges require what's called a freshman composition class, where you sit in your class, they teach you grammar, just in case you didn't pay attention in elementary school, they teach you how to structure an argument, they teach you how to write. For most students who take freshman composition, it is one of the most boring and grueling courses they will ever take, but it's absolutely necessary because they haven't learned this stuff before. Well, this class is your chance to learn all this stuff ahead of time. So why does rhetoric matter? Why were these professors so upset when these students started showing up writing in stream of consciousness? Well, that's because a lot of the work you actually have to do in college relies on rhetorical skills. You will have to write papers. You'll have to do research, you'll have to put information together, you'll have to take a stand, you'll have to structure an argument. You will have to do this week after week, month after month, semester after semester. The stronger your rhetorical skills, the better your work will be, and the less it will make your professor's eyes bleed. You'll also have to participate in debates. Very often, a midterm or final project will require you to get up and give a speech supporting or refuting a particular position. Many classes will be largely discussion. You'll have to discuss ideas in class. And again, if you have strong rhetorical skills, if you know how to build an argument, you're much more likely to succeed, get good grades, and actually learn something from those classes. And finally, you will spend a lot of time in college arguing with your friends, even if it's just about where to go for pizza. And rhetoric actually teaches you how to fight fairly, how to argue fairly. You'll get a lot further and you'll actually make more friends if you master rhetorical skills. All right, so I've convinced you that rhetoric is important. You're actually going to use it in college, but why take a test on it now? Well, remember, all of these professors know that most students who come into college have no idea how to argue. You have to convince them that they're wrong because, of course, you do know how to argue. That's why you're taking this course. So, having an AP score on this test assures professors that you know your way around an argument and can express yourself clearly. You know what you're talking about. You've got this. So this gives your professors a certain amount of peace of mind. Oh, I can believe what this person says. I can trust that they'll do a good job because they've got a 4 or a 5 on the AP exam in this subject. More importantly to you, it gets you out of the dreaded freshman composition class. You take this course, you get a good score on the test, you don't have to sit there for weeks and be lectured on grammar and how to build an argument. You can actually take a course that's a lot more fun and get to the interesting parts of college sooner. So, what's on the test? What are you actually going to be tested on? How do we beat this thing? Section 1 of the test is multiple choice. You've taken a billion of these tests. You're going to get 60 minutes for 50 to 55 questions, multiple choice questions, that count for 45% of your grade. The multiple choice section will give you a series of passages taken from literature, and we'll go into those in more detail in a minute. And you're going to have to answer questions about the passage, about the main idea, about the details in it. It's basically read, answer some multiple choice questions about what you read. You've done this. You've got this. Section 2 is free response. It's 120 minutes. You might notice it takes twice as long as the previous section, and that is because it consists of 3 essays, and they count for 55% of your grade. Now, notice that it only counts for slightly more of your grade, but you still spend twice as much time on it, and in many ways it's actually harder because this is you expressing your own ideas. So we're going to break this down a little bit more. Usually, the free response section will begin with a 15-minute mandatory reading period. Sit there and read things. You will have to read things and then write about what you've read. Then you've got your 3 essays. The first one is the analysis essay, usually rhetorical analysis. You analyze a passage, what it says and how it says it, and you have to exposit or present your own analysis of the passage. You have to say what it says and how it says it. Usually it's a good idea to budget about 40 minutes for that essay. You won't have somebody standing there with a stopwatch going, 40 minutes are up, you have to move on. But you do want to actually budget your time. Your second essay is the argumentative essay. That's another 40-minute essay that requires you to support, refute, or qualify a statement. You'll be given a quote or a main idea, and you'll have to say, I agree with this, I disagree with this, or I agree, but I've got some qualifications. Watch for those words, support, refute, or qualify. They will pretty much always show up in the question, and that'll tell you that you're writing an argumentative essay. Finally, you'll have a synthesis essay. That's your other 40 minutes, and that will require you to integrate information from a variety of sources. Notice variety. You'll have a set of passages, some of them will be short quotes, some of them will be longer, and you'll also have at least one image in most cases. They'll take different points of view on an issue, and you will have to draw many or all of those sources together to draw some conclusions. All right. So, assuming that you actually manage to get through all this and you survive, you're going to get your score. How is this test scored? I will show you. Just in case you've never taken an AP test before, the scale goes from 1 to 5. The higher your score, the better you did. 5 is what's considered extremely qualified. You are golden. You're set. Unfortunately, only about 10% of students who take the test get this score. It's equivalent to a 90 to 100% in class. It's your A grade, and you will almost certainly get college credit for it. Then you come to the 4, which is well qualified. Okay, you're doing pretty good. You're pretty solid. You're not stellar, but you're there. About a fifth of the students who take the test get this score. It's equivalent to a B, an 80 to 89%, and you will probably get college credit for it. Most of the colleges I've worked with say if you get a 4 or a 5 on the AP test, it's worth 3 units of college credit, and if it's this particular test, you can skip this particular mandatory class. Every once in a while you meet a college, they'll say, well, if you got a 5, then you get 3 units, and if you got a 4, you get 2 units, and they'll break it down. That's not very common. Usually, if you get a 4 or a 5, you're good, and if you get a 5, people are really impressed. Then we come to 3, which is considered qualified, adequate. You're okay, you survived. About a third of students who take the test get this score. It's equivalent to a 70 to 79%, so now we're in the C territory. Now, if you're an AP student, you probably don't get too many C's, but AP tests are hard. It does happen to about a third of you. And you might get college credit. Kind of a 50-50 chance. Some colleges give you credit for a 3, some say go home. Then we come to the 2. That is possibly qualified. I like to think of this as, well, they showed up for the test and they might know what they're doing, but it just wasn't their day. About a quarter of students who take the test get this. It is equivalent to a 60 to 69%, so now we're in D territory. You will very rarely get college credit for a 2 on the AP exam. It just doesn't happen all that often. And then we come to level 1, the lowest score, not qualified. About 10% of students who take the test get this. It is equivalent to an F, and no, you will not get college credit for it. I have never in my life seen a college that would give you credit for a 1. Okay, so now we've gone over the test, we've gone over what's being tested and how it's being scored. How is this course going to help you kick this test's butt? I'll tell you. We're going to begin by an introduction, which is basically this lesson, telling you everything I've just told you. Then we're going to have a section on the multiple choice part of the test. We're going to talk about the questions, how to answer them, your best strategies. We're going to do an overview of the multiple choice section. We're going to have an entire lesson just on how to read and interpret a passage, how to get the most out of your reading. And then we're going to do some real-world practice with an actual passage and some actual questions, and we're going to see how each one of them works. Then we've got a unit on essay basics. Now this is a little different from the essays you've written in class. This is how to write an essay for a standardized test. So we're going to talk about an introduction to the essay section, what's actually going on in there, what the questions are asking, get into some details there. We're going to look specifically at essay scoring, because if you know how you're being scored, you know how to get a better score. And finally, we're going to do a special lesson just on how to write an essay for a standardized test, how to deal with time limits, how to deal with scoring, all of that good stuff. Then we're going to take a crash course in rhetoric. This is basically a condensed version of the argumentation lessons you would get in freshman composition. You're going to get all of that ahead of time, which will help you convince professors you know what you're doing. We're going to talk about the 3 elements of argument, the 3 things you have to have in order to have a solid, logical argument and good rhetoric. We're going to take a special look at logical fallacies. These are common errors in logic that you'll want to avoid, and they're also common errors in logic that you'll want to spot in some of the passages you'll be reading. If you can pick out an error in someone else's logic, mention it in your essay or in your multiple choice answers, you will get points. And then we're going to talk about basic and advanced rhetorical modes. These are basically kinds of arguments you can make, and some of them are simpler and some of them are more complex. We'll go over all of that. Then we've got a section just on the rhetorical analysis essay. What is it? How do you do it? And we're going to do some real practice with an actual prompt and look at some actual essays. We're going to do the same with the argumentative essay. What is the argumentative essay? How do you do the argumentative essay? And then we're going to do practice, again, with an actual prompt and actual essays. Finally, we're going to look at that synthesis essay. That's the one with the multiple sources. We're going to look at what is it? How do you do it? And, again, real-world practice. Finally, this course will conclude with final thoughts, which will be tips for test day. Simple things that you can do the night before the test, the week before the test, and even the morning of the test to raise your score. Really basic stuff that a lot of people sometimes forget, and maybe even a couple of tips that you haven't heard before. Last-minute strategies that can make a big difference in your score. And that's all for this lesson. In our next one, we'll begin our overview of the multiple choice section. Thank you for watching Educator.com.